Can everyone see that clearly?
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, all good.
Great. Okay, so I mean, our goal here is for you to come out the other end, having an idea, having a clear enough idea of how the Western Province ranking system works, that without giving it too much thought, you have an idea of how it works for years to come. And this system has been relatively stable. We implemented it, I'm thinking like 2018-ish. Before then, like it had been very unstable trying to find something that worked, and this has worked very well. The goal of the system is very simple. The goal is gold medals at A nationals. That's what we're after. Like, and in that sense, we don't care who comes fourth and who comes third. We care whether the top five are right. And like the fringe benefit of that is that a system that inherently gets the top five right is likely to get the next five right as well. And so that's our goal. This presentation is not necessarily a policy document, so there are variations over time. Like I updated this presentation from a previous one from about 2017, 2018, and things have changed since then as we've kind of refined it to deal with abnormal circumstances, and we'll cover some of those in this presentation. But we're going to start with very big picture and then slowly work our way down into the nitty-gritty. But essentially, at the end of the whole Western Province ranking process, which takes a year, you get a score out of 100 points. And that's the final outcome. Your score out of 100 points or 100%, however you want to view it, determines where you sit on the ladder. And typically, the first five people who make themselves available for A nationals are then in the A team. So in theory, if someone in the A team is in the top five is not available for A nationals, you move outside of the first five and you select into 6, 7, 8. And even that person who is not available for A nationals might be available for B nationals. So they'll then get put into the B team. What you're not allowed to do is represent the Western Province B team and the Western Province A team at A nationals. At B nationals and A nationals. SAFA doesn't allow that. B nationals is a development thing. You're not supposed to be putting your top anglers there. It gets a little tricky because essentially your 6th ranked angler is going to be your best B team angler. But what happens if between B nats and A nats, one of your A team gets injured or gets a job overseas? Now, who are you going to recruit into your A team? Obviously, your next best ranked angler who already attended BNATs. The SAFA doesn't really have a strong solution to that. What we try to do is if we anticipate a situation like that before BNAT happens, before we even field a B team, we send our ranking list to the SAFA to say, hey, this is in stone, this is our plan. Like you can see how we're going to move down our list. We're not adapting our list in order to try to field a strong B team by pulling A team members into the B team and then pulling them back into the A team again later. Worth noting, your path to attend A nationals, if you're not already in the A team, is typically through the B team. So you attend B nationals and you come in the top 10, you'll automatically receive an invitation to attend A nationals as an invitational angler. Typically, people in the top 10 turn down that invitation because they're not available or they don't have the funds. And so they work up the BNATS ranking list up to the 15th place to fill those 2 invitational teams. Sometimes they even field a 3rd invitational team. So BNATS is a great way to get involved in ANATS. And you'll see your ANATS ranking has an influence on your final Western Province ranking as well. So what is this 100 points made out of? How do you get 100 points at Western Province in order to improve your ranking? Essentially, there are 2 components. 80% are the trials that you attend, and we'll break that up into subcomponents. And 20% is a past performance component. And we put that there to iron out some of the variability in the trials, but also to give people recognition for particularly how well they've done at national competitions. And so if you've got someone who won a nationals, that can contribute towards them making the A team the following year. But it's weighted very, very heavily towards performance in trials. With this sort of split, is it possible to come in your first year and perform so well at trials that you make the A team? Yes, it is. There have been people that have done it, but it's hard to do. And the reason it's hard to do is because the people in the A team who are getting that past performance result are getting really high marks there because they're performing excellently at ANATs. Is that a problem? Do we view that as a defect? No, we view that as a feature, because those people who are doing really well at ANATs, we're happy with that. That's the goal of the system. So we want to keep them around. But typically, the way to make your way into the A team is to attend BNATs first, and then get that invitational slot, and then go and do well at ANATs. It sounds a little harsh, but essentially, if you can't back yourself to get into the top 10 at BNATs, you're not ready for the A team. You should really be convinced that you're definitely going to come top 10 at BNATs, and then you'll make the A team in the next round. So what are those trials? How does that break down? How do you get that 80% of your trials results? Where does that come from? And it comes from a split of the river trials and the Stillwater trials. But what that split is dependent on each year. So what we do is around the end of the trial cycle, the information for the next year's A National starts to become available. We give the chairperson a call and we say, what sectors are you planning? And then we try to split this ratio of how valuable rivers is relative to Stillwaters to the ratio of the next A Nationals. But we limit it because even in a full rivers A Nationals, we still want to be selecting anglers that are more rounded. So this was a question that came up. It used to be we just followed the nationals. Now we have a minimum of a third. So even if there are no Stillwaters still count a third. They don't get thrown out. We used to throw them out. We don't do that anymore. So the next A Nationals, I actually phoned KZN today and spoke to the vice chair and said, okay, what are you doing at the next A Nationals? And they said, it's not 100% clear, but we're more likely than not going to do 4 rivers and 1 still. So that would be a split of 4-1, which is more than what you see here. That would make stills even smaller, but we're not letting stills get less than a third of that 80%. So that's how, and then how you earn these points within rivers and stills we'll cover next. Everyone clear on that so far?
Makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, happy.
We'll break all these things up into smaller and smaller pieces as we go. So then worth understanding is that every year is sort of a fresh trial cycle, and that cycle starts in winter with the Stillwaters. So it sort of ends after the autumn river trials, and typically at the same time, that's when A Nationals is. So you get that last A Nationals result into the past record, and you get those last couple of autumn trials in, and then the cycle ends and we pick teams. And so more than typically BNATs is October-ish. So now we can pick teams in May, and those teams have got time to prep. They also, they're getting involved, they can get their funds together and so on. So it's nice and far in advance. So we start with the Stillwater in winter. There's typically 2 weekends and you have to fish for one of them. A weekend is a Saturday, Sunday. There's a morning session and an afternoon session on both days. So there are 4 sessions. And you can pick one of 2 weekends. That's not always the case. Some years we have fewer anglers and we can fit everybody into one weekend. We try to make sure that we can accommodate people, but typically it's 2 weekends, and we try our best to split the previous year's top 8 anglers over the 2 weekends, so that one weekend doesn't get too stacked. It's difficult to force people into a weekend, so it doesn't always work out that way, but we put pressure on people in order to try and unstack them. I'd say that Western Province stillwater trials are the hardest stillwater competition in the country. Got a difficult stillwater with some very good anglers fishing straight up head to head. The next part of the cycle is Spring River weekends. Again, there's 2 weekends that you can pick from, and there are 4 sessions over a weekend. And that happens typically around October through December. The dates change every year. And then the last element of the cycle is then in March through May, there'll be autumn rivers. So it's typically, you're looking at the situation where rivers count twice as much, but there are twice as many river trials. So it kind of matches up, but that's not always the case. Also, part of that trial cycle is the BNATs and ANATs results from that SAFA year. So the SAFA year starts at the same as that cycle, kind of in midwinter in August. And so BNAT is typically October-ish, ANAT is typically April or so, can be March, can be May. And so those results form part of your past record. We'll get into those details later. And your previous year's Western Province ranking also contributes. So all those things together contribute a single trial cycle that will then pick the teams for the next year. So right now we're about to end a cycle and start a new one. So we'll end one in May. This weekend is the last element of the cycle. And so then we'll pick A team and B team depending on who makes themselves available. So we'll start going down the list and asking people. Once we've got those teams, those are the teams that are selected for October-ish BNATs and April-May 2025 ANATs. And so this winter now will be the beginning of the cycle that selects for 2026. So how do you get that 2/3, 66%? How do you get full 66% for your river score? That counts 2/3 of that 80% for your trials. And the way you get it is there are 80 points available to you, and your score out of 80 is going to be scaled so that it matches into that 66%. So I'm not terribly, I could make this score out of 1,500 and then scale it into that 66%. It's pragmatic to make it out of 10 points for each trial that you do. So you'll go for a weekend. On Saturday morning, you'll fish a trial. Saturday afternoon, you'll fish a trial. Sunday morning, a trial. And Sunday afternoon, a trial. And each of those trials that you fish against another angler, and I'll cover the details of that in a moment, each of them, there are 10 points available for you to score. And so if you catch many fish in every trial and your partner catches no fish in every trial, you'll get the full 10 points. You do that in spring and autumn, you get the full 80 points. And that means in this calculation, you'll get 66.66. Going in, 66.66 out of your rivers. And that means that you'll get a big chunk of your 80% for your still waters. Anyway, I'm complicating it unnecessarily. The way you get 10 points in a trial, or how the points are calculated in each trial, is in each one of these river matches. How those river matches work in terms of who fishes when and how, there's a separate document for that. And I typically send that out to the WhatsApp group that people join for a particular trial. But each river match essentially is going to be one of 8, so 12.5% of your final river result. And so the way you calculate how many of your 10 points you get is by saying, okay, let's say you caught 2 fish and the other angler caught 4 fish. That means that there were 6 fish caught. So that 6 is important. So now you say, okay, of the 10 points available, 2 out of 6 go to you and 4 out of 6 goes to the other guy. So you get 3.3 points and he gets 6.66 points. And the same goes if you each caught 5 fish, that means that there were 10 fish caught. So you caught 5 out of 10, you get 5 points, and the other person also gets 5 points. There are exceptions to this. So the one exception, of course, is if you both catch 0 fish. You don't go, well, 0 out of 0 is undefined, therefore give me all 10 points. Or we both, it was unfishable. Is there an alternative? Nope. We don't want to select. The goal of the thing is to select anglers who will win a nats. So people who blank, they must take a penalty. So 0-0 gets you 0 points. And the other exception we found is that there were situations where the fishing, you had two very weak anglers, and one got 1 and one got 0. And the person who got 1 was getting 10 points. And 10 points is a big deal. You're getting a big chunk of your river results. It pushes you way ahead. And so we taper that down a little bit. If you win 1-0 against someone in a trial, you only get 7 of the 10 points. If you fish 2-0, then you get the full 10. And we found that seems to have ironed out a little bit of the variability. We do tend to look and say, okay, how often does this occur? And it seems that this tapering off to a 7-0 instead of a 10-0 for a 1-0 fish situation, that seems to have worked well. Any questions on how the river points work?
Oh,
Cool. The Stillwaters are a little bit different. So again, you'll rock up at Stillwater Trials for a whole weekend, morning, afternoon, Saturday, Sunday. Again, each session is independent from the other ones. You get 10 points out of each session. There's so many typos in this presentation. But the way in which you get those 10 points is quite different because you're all fishing at the same time. So you're not just fishing against your boat partner. There are typically 2 people in a boat. You're all fishing out on the dam at the same time. So we rank you against each other. So the way the ranking works is you measure the size of your fish and the number of your fish, and you get points per fish in the same way that we do for normal competition fishing, which is, I think, 20 points per centimeter and 100 points per fish. Typically, you're still just trying to catch as many fish as you can, but size acts as a tiebreaker. And at the end of each session, you rank the anglers within that session. And so you got the first ranked angler and second ranked angler based on the fish that they caught within that session across the whole pool of people that were there during that session. And so the session winner gets a full 10 points and the session loser gets nothing. And then everyone else gets scaled in between. So if there are 10 people, if there are 11 people, then you've got the first person gets 10 points, the second person gets 9, and the 10th person gets 1, and the 11th person gets 0. But if there are 8 people, then the points are sort of in between their fractions. I'm not going to list those off. There is one additional complication that makes this tricky, and that is often between the 2 weekends, there are different numbers of anglers. So often it's sort of 8 in one and 10 in the other. And even within a weekend, you have people who leave. Maybe their wife gave birth. That happened one year. One guy had to run off because he had a child. And so then you've got a change in the total number of anglers within a session. And generally, we acknowledge that it's harder to win if there are more anglers on the water because you have to beat more people. And so what we do is we scale the number of points available within a session to the number of anglers that are there. And the math behind that's a little bit tricky, but essentially the only way you can score the maximum is if you're in the bigger sessions. And so we try our best to make sure that the sessions have the same number of anglers across the board. But it does push you down and up a little bit depending on how many people are in there. Again, it's just a way of nudging the needle to be more accurate. Ultimately, the top anglers tend to come out on top. And when I say the top anglers come out on top, what I mean is they then go on to do very well at nationals. The whole still water calculation situation is about to change. I'm not going to say how it's going to change because we haven't voted and discussed on it yet. But what happened last year can't be allowed to happen again, which is we had abysmal fishing and we had an extraordinary amount of blanks, except for 2 anglers. And those 2 anglers then had more than double the number of points as everyone else. And it created this massive disparity in the group that I think served against the goal of the trials. We left it as it is after lots of discussion across the trials groups as to whether or not we should make a post hoc adjustment. And we left it, we decided adjustments were not, created more problems than they solved. It's a very, if you're going to make a post hoc adjustment, you have to be very sure as to why you're doing it. And it was very borderline, but we opted not to. But we're probably going to change the way we calculate still water points before the next trial. So keep an eye out for that. So now you've got these 2 sets of trials, and they get scaled into that purple block and that light blue block. What about the past results? And the past results is broken into 3 components. One is last year's A Nationals. So for the cycle that we're currently about to finish, that's the A Nationals that happened in KZN a couple of weeks ago. Then there's the Nationals from a year before that, but it's rated at half. And then finally, last year's Western Province rankings. The Nationals results, both of them, have a BNATS component as well. So if you didn't go to ANATS, but you did go to BNATS, you can get some of those points, and I'll explain how in a moment. So the last year's Western Province, we'll start at that bottom one, last trial. So the last year's Western Province ranking, you get that count 25% of this past result component is essentially, you start off only the top 20 places from last year get any points towards it. And the first one gets all the 20 and the last one gets the last point. And this gets scaled then from out of 20 to out of 25 in order to fulfill that bottom red block. The last Nationals results counts for half of your past result. So past result counts 20%. So 10% of your final 100 points comes from last year's A Nationals. And it's got to do with how far down the ranking. If you won it, then you get all the points. And if you came last, you get none of the points. And if you came middle of the pack, you get half the points. If you competed in BNATS last year, we score it in the same way. The person who came first would get all the points, the person who came last get none, but then that score gets halved. So BNATS is worth half of ANATS. And if you fish both BNATS and ANATS like Potty did now, we pick whatever's most beneficial to you. So Potty came second or third at BNATS. So he's going to get of these 50% of the points for his past ranking, he's going to get a big chunk of that, but because it's BNATS, it's halved. Then we can look at his ANATS results and say, oh, would he get more points if we used ANATS? And the answer in his case is no. He's not getting more points from that, even considering it's not halved. So we just stick with his BNATS results, which were very good. 1 year back, we do exactly the same thing, except 1 year back. So now we're talking about the BNATS that happened in 2022 and the ANATS that happened in 2023. It's asking me if I'm running out of time. How much time do we have left? I don't know, it doesn't tell me. Anyway, we calculate it in the same way, but those are worth half of what last year's ones are worth. The most recent ones are worth. If you miss a trial, let's just check what else. Okay, I'm going to get to missed trials last in case we run out of time. Oh, we've got still got 10 minutes. That's fine. So most of the time, if someone can't make a trial or they're missing a trial and they get hold of us in advance, or something happens like at the last river trials, James McKenzie got sick. And after Saturday, he was like passing out and almost didn't get back from the river, and he couldn't come on Sunday. So he was fully sick, and he got hold of us and he was like, what's the deal? And we took it to the subcommittee and we agreed, no, he can fill those next 2 missed sessions in at the next river trials, and we make an exception. So that happens a lot. Almost every trials has some sort of question that ends up with the subcommittee. And again, we view questions that come that way through the lens of saying what serves the goals of this process, and the goals of the process are to select the best team. But we can't use prejudice of saying we know who the best team is, we must select them. To select the best team must be to have a process that selects the best team. So we put active effort into not having a prejudice, like saying, oh, well, we know Maddie is a good angler. And so we don't go down that route. We rather say, no, people must stand and fall on their results. Typically, let's say James had fished 3 out of his 4 sessions. We would then not invite him to fish his 4th session at another trials. We would just scale his 3 up. So that's our general rule, is that 3 can be scaled out of 4. But 2 out of 4 can't be scaled to 2 out of 4. Then you've got to fish. There are various other exceptions that we've made over the years, but typically we try to get people to fish. We don't infer results unless we really have to. But we often have people pulling out of trials late, like Wednesday, Thursday before the weekend. They say, no, work got too busy or something like that. Essentially, if your excuse for not attending a trial is not something that would get you out of work, so you need someone to die, you need to be like sick enough to get a doctor's note, you need to break a bone, and then we'll show a lot of sympathy. But if it's, oh, things got really busy, or I've got my great aunt's birthday party and she's very old, we're not going to show sympathy for that. And so that kind of takes us to an overview of how this all fits together. And we've got 6.5 minutes left of this meeting. I can kind of show you how it ends up in Excel, or I can just take questions now.